Well, I'm happy to say we can discuss the case now with American journalist Patrick Lancaster. Patrick, you're very welcome to the programme. You indeed were the first to break this, what can only be described as a very disturbing story. Facts are limited on the ground. Take us through, as you see it, what happened there.
Well, it was one of my first times in this period in Mariupol, and it's very hot now, but weeks ago it was even hotter, as you can imagine. And we were going through building to building, just seeing everything decimated, and just talking to the locals, and even talking to some of the DPR mobilization soldiers. One of them who happened to show us this basement of this school number 25 in Mariupol, and he took us down, and we could see many amounts of Ukrainian uniforms and patches and flags, and a huge stash of weapons, which seem to have been purposely burned. Maybe so the DPR and Russian forces wouldn't be able to take. It's just speculation on that side. But the fact is, there was a huge amount of weapons burned, which looked intentional. As we moved our way through this Ukrainian base slash basement of school number 25, we get to a little back area. This whole time we're passing uniforms and military shoes, Ukrainian flags and patches and things, and then we get to this little open area, and unfortunately we found this woman partially covered, actually with a couple of uniforms, Ukrainian uniforms as well, and as you said, her stomach had a swastika on it. For me, looking at it, just being in shock from seeing that, it was hard to tell whether it was carved or painted on with blood. But I mean, you could see what had happened there. This woman had been raped, tortured, and strangled to death in the basement of this school, in Ukrainian military base.
Just absolutely horrific as you go through the details. Patrick, maybe you can shed some light as well as to what Russian and Donetsk Republic officials are saying about the investigation into the killing.
Well, I'm going to Mariupol almost every day now, just to kind of really embed and stay into what's happening there. So I'm sure there's going to be a full investigation, but the fact is, there's so much active fighting there. It's hard for them to move bodies. A lot of, if not most of them in the city, are actively being buried by the residents themselves to stop the spread of disease. As far as what's happened to this young woman, I'm not sure, but I hope there is a full investigation and whoever is at fault gets brought to justice, but I seriously doubt it. But we can only hope.
Patrick, you're somebody with a lot of experience in that region and indeed across the post-Soviet space. But in terms of Donbass, that region, we've seen lots of reports about Ukrainian nationalist forces in particular using civilians as human shields. Can you give some insight into such cases? Have you talked to people? Is that something that you've seen?
Well, being in Mariupol, I talk to the people, and I tell them what is being portrayed in the Western mainstream media, how the West says that everything is the fault of Russia, and Russia is shelling everything, shelling all the civilian areas, and their words telling me, when I confront them with these facts of what the West is saying, is that it's not true. And this can be seen in many of my reports. I put my interviews up full without cuts, so there can be no misinterpretation. The locals on the ground in Mariupol are telling me that the Azov battalion fired on their buildings, fired from their buildings, and fired on civilians when civilians tried to leave. This is what the locals are telling me.
Patrick, thank you so much for coming on the programme and sharing that direct reaction with us. You've been on the ground there. You've seen a lot there. Thank you for sharing it with our audience. Patrick Lancaster, American journalist, live in Donetsk.